The trees here are in misery and the birds are in misery. I don't think they sing, they just screech in pain.
Hello gamers, welcome back to Yeehaw Summer. I decided to start filming outside. There's a turtle over there. He's gone. You didn't see him. That turtle was for me, not for you. In my last video, I discussed Captain Killmoon, otherwise known as John Cremony, a skull-measuring soldier and cowboy who fought with the Apache, and had reached pretty damning conclusions, not only on their morals, but also the shapes of their skulls. I got some comments, which seemed confused as to,
Who the hell?
Why? That video was as fun as we are going to get. This is my darkest cobbler arc yet. John Cremony, between all his anecdotes about battle with Apache savages, wrote,
"If the white man has come to be regarded as the Apache's natural enemy, it may be set down as the result of long and murderous schooling. The inherent disposition of the American nomad inclined him to hospitality, but that inclination has been completely blotted out, and its opposite engrafted on his nature. Legends and traditions of white men's ingratitude have been handed down through so many generations, and the experiences of the living have been in such direct accordance with them that they have become prime articles of their creed."
So every time a white guy is mean to an Apache, does that like change their skull shape, or like what the fuck are you? I know he was a cowboy phrenologist, but I expect some level of consistency, right? John Cremony is an easy man to hate, an easy man to mock, and that's why I had so much fun doing it. But the fact is, he's absolutely right here. Every Western book I've read, everything about the Apache, it takes a minute to say, hey, this is just what this place is like. So I'm going to explore why it's like this. It's 1871, and you're a young lieutenant in the U.S. Army in Arizona. Tales of Apache raids haunt you as much as they do everyone else. Everyone feared the Apache. And yet, the chief of the Aravaipa Apache walks into your post and asks for protection. You explain that there are reservations set up in other places, that you are a humble lieutenant, you can't guarantee safety. And the chief's argument, his response to this lieutenant, well, it's very simple. Other people already live at that reservation, and they're not our people. Our people have always lived here, and want to continue to do so, in peace. Do you want that too? Lieutenant Whitman offered simple terms to Chief Eskiminson and his 150 Aravaipa Apache. Turn in your guns, accept being prisoners of war under my protection here. You'll be allowed to live amongst yourselves, farm, it's a technical thing. And, I'll speak to my superiors about a more permanent solution to this problem. This Apache problem. What a sinister deal. No, I yell at the book. No, don't do it, Eskiminson. He's a bad man. Taking that deal, it does speak to a hopeless and desperate situation. I don't like to get directly political in a contemporary sense, but I'm big on the Second Amendment. That's why I bought this puppy off Craigslist. The second to last thing you will ever do in your life is give your guns to the American fucking government. Lieutenant Whitman, though, well, he was a good guy. Nobody had told him that you don't do that here. That's why I was yelling no at the book. I had no idea that Lieutenant Whitman was so mistaken.
The Aravaipa Apache established a village a few miles up the creek, planted corn, and began cooking mescal. Impressed by their industry, Whitman employed them to cut hay for the camp's cavalry horses so they could earn money to buy supplies. Neighboring ranchers also employed some of them as laborers. The experiment worked so well that by mid-March, more than 100 other Apaches had joined Eskiminson's people, and others were coming almost daily.
So this is gonna sound like an insult, but I consider it baller as fuck. The Apache had the most primitive form of politics in existence. You listened to who you thought was worth listening to. I know, how savage and uncivilized. Punishment for crimes came in the form of banishment from the tribe, or however bad the victim of the crime could kick the shit out of you. And laws were unwritten. If you wanted to raid, which was considered a totally acceptable, economic practice, you just needed to convince your buddies. Raids were frequent, and newspapers spread these sordid tales of Apache raids across the broader Southwest. What started the American wars with the Apache was the kidnapping of a child during an Apache raid. The American government did what the American government does. They found the first guy they could blame, and then they tried to hold him hostage, and things got out of hand. So as the Aravaipa Apache were living, by all indications, peacefully here at Camp Grant, raids were continuing.
What's up, gamers? Did you know that the number of data breaches increases worldwide year after year? Did you know that I have stolen your identity and am currently in your favorite chair, drinking all of your yoo-hoos? Save yourself, your data, and your chocolate drink, whatever the fuck that is, by using Incogni. Incogni will spare you the trouble of finding and requesting your removal from these public databases which, yes, anyone in the US can search. Stalkers, nefarious actors, or even worse, your boss and or landlord can access this information. You can imagine how slimy these data brokers are, but Incogni gives no quarter and it takes no quarter. You won't have to lift a finger as they do the hard work for you. With Incogni, I saw reduced text messages from random third worlders who, for some reason, seem to get all of my packages by accident. These scammers get your phone number from data brokers, and Incogni can save you from these annoying and constant messages. Furthermore, aforementioned landlords, bosses, and people attempting identity theft. Protect your yoo-hoos and safeguard your data by using code DJPeach at the link below and get 60% off their annual plan. Thank you, Incogni, for sponsoring this video and saving yoo-hoos the world over.
What's up, gamers? So I forgot that there are dates. You're supposed to use a date when you do history. So 1871. That's all the date you get. I don't like using big dates. It just confuses you. You're gamers. You don't know what time is. So what I was supposed to fucking say here was in 1871.
A posse of 42 Mexicans and 6 Americans left Tucson towards Camp Grant, with the intention of exterminating what they believed were the guilty Apache behind these raids. A further 92 Papago Indians were recruited as mercenaries. Lieutenant Whitman was warned of the posse's imminent arrival, and so he sent messengers, with warnings to the Apache camp. The messengers returned to Whitman with the news. There was no Apache camp. To read from the testimony of Dr. Conant B. Breesley, which was given to the Bureau of Indian Affairs,
the camp had been burned, and the dead bodies of some 21 women and children were lying scattered over the ground. Those who'd been wounded in the first instance had their brains beaten out with stones. 2 of the best-looking of the women were first ravished and then shot dead. Nearly all of the dead were mutilated. 1 infant of some 10 months was shot twice and 1 leg nearly hacked off.
This would become known as the Camp Grant Massacre. It was an act so morally abhorrent that President Ulysses S. Grant would threaten to place the entire state of Arizona under martial law if this posse was not brought to justice. They had to be tried in a court of law. We are Americans, damn it. And tried they were. Justice was served. Not guilty. Listen, the women and the children, they just did that. SIDS, right? Well, this was the first and last recorded case of Sistalco. Lieutenant Whitman, for the crime of possessing empathy in this time and place, was slandered by the same local papers which slandered the Apache he sought to protect. He was accused of looking the other way as the Apache did their raids, as he was busy, of course, with the dusky maidens, as the newspapers put it. Maybe he had that Delanda dog in him. But I find Whitman's own explanation far more compelling.
I'd come to feel respect for men who, ignorant and naked, were still ashamed to lie or steal, and for women who would work cheerfully like slaves to clothe themselves and children, but, untaught, held their virtue above price. Aware of the lies and hints industriously circulated by the puerile press of the territory, I was content to know I had positive proof they were so.
Eskiminson was not among the slain. The men were out hunting. Over 100 armed men descended upon a camp, which was almost completely composed of women, children, and the elderly. Eskiminson stayed in the mountains and did not return to Camp Grant. He refused to return to American custody, and obviously, how could you fucking blame him? When a representative of the Indian Bureau came to talk him into making the same mistake again, Eskiminson hit him with,
"The Tucson people write for the papers and tell their own story. The Apaches have no one to tell their story."
A situation which has been rectified to some degree, certainly, but all the same, I find myself in an unenviable position. I describe massacres so I can explain them. I like learning about people, why we are the way we are, why we do what we do. Bigotry does not need to be explained, but this is not just bigotry. It's something far angrier, deeper, more ancient. Surely, you noticed how wonderfully diverse the murder posse was. It is so fucking hot. To explain is not the same as to justify. Just because, you know now that the newspapers were not presenting the Apache perspective and were quick to blame anything on them, that doesn't mean the guys in the posse knew that. I'm gonna be completely honest, I'm gonna assume that murder posses have a pretty low median IQ.
Historians now discount the outrage of the pioneers and the hysterics of the newspapers, attributing ulterior motives to the merchants and editors as they demanded more soldiers to chase Indians and bring more business to Arizona and New Mexico. To the white people involved, this would have been utter nonsense, convinced as they were that the lives of every man, woman, and child in the territories were in deadly peril.
Also, I just gotta say this, it is easy to drag the Apache's public image. The stealing of the women, the children, the livestock, livestock are useful. What's with the women and the children? Geronimo gave a dowry of many horses for his wife, Alope. The way he talked about Alope, it was so sweet. As sweet as Geronimo gets, anyway. But it's important to note, Geronimo stole those horses. He might have killed someone, multiple people, for those horses. The Apache were just, they trained their kids like Navy SEALs, you know? They were about this shit. You understand what I'm saying?
From early childhood, Apache boys were schooled in pain. They would be taught, for instance, to place dry sage on their skins, set fire to it, and let it burn to ashes without flinching. In winter, they had to go out at dawn and roll a ball of snow with bare hands until called away from the task. In foot races, laggards were lashed by adults. Had things always been thus, back beyond the 16th century in that uncertain time when an Athapascan people, with dogs but no horses, flint arrowheads but no iron, had first wandered into the Southwest from their ancestral domain in the Canadian North? Or had the Apaches, the most adaptable of tribes, learned their deadly severities from the descendants of those masters of cruelty, the Spanish conquistadors? The question, in all likelihood, will never be answered.
Let's answer that question. Well, Andres Resendez did. Who are the Apache? Where'd they come from? The biggest mistake you can make learning about the interactions between Europeans and their descendants and Native Americans is the assumption that both of them are not constantly changing. Just think about how much Europeans changed between 1492 and 1871. Athapascan-speaking peoples, who would later become the Apache and the Navajo, arrived in the Southwest around the same time as the Spaniards. Furthermore, Apache and Navajo are both exonyms. They both call themselves the Dine, which just means the people. I love what that illustrates about human nature because they hated each other, the Apache and the Navajo. They enslaved each other. A lot. We'll explain why. But listen, we can't both be the people. One of us have to be the victims. Europeans first encountered these Athapascan-speaking peoples in 1540 on the Coronado expedition. This testimony was recorded by Pedro de Castañeda. Spanish ethnography is a fucking nightmare, but this is almost certainly the people that would later become the Apache, or the people that would later become the Apache and the Navajo.
They have better figures or better warriors and are more feared than neighboring tribes. They travel like the Arabs, with tents and troops of dogs loaded with poles, and having Moorish pack saddles with girths. When the load gets disarranged, the dogs howl, calling someone to fix them right. These people eat raw flesh and drink blood. They do not eat human flesh. They are a kind people and not cruel. They are faithful friends.
Why did he mention that they didn't eat human flesh? Right? Like, that seems, it's a very particular thing to note. Well, some Indian groups did, you know, it's important to note that, but the real reason that Pedro wrote that down is, you were not allowed to enslave Indians in the Spanish Empire. Unless, hey, they eat guys. I promise. It's important to note that between this interaction and the Camp Grant Massacre was over 300 years. That is longer than America as a nation has existed. Anyway, though, for the next around 150 years, the Apache would get enslaved endlessly by the Spanish. But it was illegal, you fucking idiot! Alright, so you know how the law, didn't mean anything in the Wild West? You could round up fuckers, go massacre some Apache, and then you'd be okay? That was the case here. 4 centuries, and what I've taken to calling the Spanish slaving fields. The Spanish would slave the Indians by running them down on horseback, sending them southwards to labor in silver mines and Spanish households. There were 12 million Africans shipped across the Atlantic total, and somewhere between 2.5 to 5 million Indian slaves in that time, according to The Other Slavery by Andres Resendez. Big gap. That's a big gap. The reason for that gap is this is a shadowy part of history, but it is there. It's been there. Everyone is stealing kids and women in the Wild West like you wouldn't believe.
At this place, a lieutenant commented, officers who have Indians in charge will have to exercise extreme vigilance, or the Indians' children will be stolen from them and sold.
What started the war between the Chiricahua Apache, including Geronimo, and the U.S. government was a child getting kidnapped from a ranch. Spaniards would run down the Indians themselves until the Pueblo Revolt of 1680, where the Pueblo, partially due to the Spanish labor demands, slavery, overthrew their masters and stole all those Spanish horses. That was how horses entered the hands of Indians. Once the Spaniards regained control of New Mexico, they couldn't run down the Indians anymore. You see, the fact is, the Ute and the Comanche in particular ended up with most of those fucking horses and lots of slaves to sell. The Ute would slave their close relatives, the Paute. Brothers were separated by distance, and then time, and then culture, and then language, and then finally, they are no longer brothers. That, to me, is the grand narrative of human history. Yeehaw Summer is about learning to forgive humanity and then becoming human again. I hope. That's what I'm trying to do. We'll see what happens. We're taking the warpath against mankind itself. Intellectually, YouTube, please, for the love of God, do not delete my channel. The Comanche would gain incredible power and influence by capturing and selling Indian slaves to the Spanish. If you were in or near the Great Plains, you were a possible target. But the Comanche had favorites, and we called them the Apache. The Apache of the 1800s, right? Lots of lies written about them, make no mistake. Far from everything written about them is true, but they definitely did tie men upside down, put little campfires under their heads, and cook their live brains. They definitely... I love when people tiptoe around this one. They, took wives. You know what I mean? They would go, and you go into the village, and you do things to the men, and then you take the women. I'm not saying this is okay. None of history is okay. What I'm illustrating is the Apache didn't invent this. They learned this. This was a reaction. This was the way that things were done here. Criminy, it killed me, man. He brought up how Christian belief, like turning the other cheek, right? It's alien to the Apache. Turning the other cheek? How foolish. First of all, turning the other cheek is supposed to be stupid. Like, that's the fucking point. You measure skulls, criminy. I'm asking you this question now. How long can you turn the other cheek in the Spanish slaving fields? The Apache would fight many wars with the Comanche. Apache men were killed and women and children were dragged south. It wasn't until the 1820s that the balance of power in the Southwest shifted yet again. With Mexico fighting its war for independence, security on their northern frontier decayed, opening up Mexico to both Comanche and Apache raids. Those Comanche raids into Mexico ranged deep. This is a baller-ass map right here. The Apache were different, and there were reasons for that, and those reasons were not written in their skulls. They were written in blood. They were written in time. They were written in the most desperate of circumstances. Andres Resendez had to piece together a story of Indian enslavement, which is staggering in its implications, and which I hope you yourself will read. This one is worth it, I promise. You shouldn't have read Creminy's thing. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have recommended that. I like that book. No one else will like that book. As Europeans and their descendants put more and more pressure on the Apache, raiding would transform into a necessity. Their homes would be occupied and they'd have to live on the run. Consider this testimony from a chief of the Tonto Apache.
We are tired of living in caves and on the tops of cold mountains. My women carry water 2 or 3 miles from the little streams. They get water at night because we're afraid of soldiers. Even rabbits are safer than my Tontos. We hide our children behind big rocks when we go hunt the deer, but deer are not so many now. You say Tontos must not steal cattle, but we must steal or starve. White Americans have stolen our cornfields and our wheat fields. What are we to do?
John Cremeny recorded the testimony of a Mexican general, the military governor of the state of Sonora, by the name of Carrasco. General Carrasco claimed the Apache would conduct raids in his state, then go to the state of Chihuahua, in which they were at peace with, to sell what they stole and get rations from the government. To be clear, this was tribute given to the Apache. The Apache were often giving tribute by the Mexican government. That is some steppe barbarian ass shit right there, man. There's a turtle over there. I'm sorry you still can't see him. In light of this information, General Carrasco assembled a militia and marched to Janos, where he planned to fight these Apache. Well, he didn't want to fight Apache. Who the fuck wants to fight Apache? No. You want to show up while the men are gone. Then you just kill the women and children. The massacre at Janos and the Camp Grant Massacre. Do you think they waited for the men to leave?
Not being able to comprehend the virtue of a policy which feeds Indians in one state that they might prey upon and destroy the citizens of another, I concluded that my duty was to destroy the enemy wherever I could find him. Acting upon this decision, I waited until the allotted time for the Apaches to visit Janos to obtain their regular quarterly rations, and by forced marches at night, succeeded in reaching the place just as the carnival was at its height. We killed 130 and took about 90 prisoners, principally women and children.
General Carrasco, to be very clear, was a Mexican general in the 1800s, so he was not a good guy. All the good guys in this place were fucking dead. All the same, his course of action, it's not inherently unreasonable. This is all reasonable. That's what I need you to understand. Very reasonably were the mother, wife, and 3 children of Geronimo scalped and left to rot in the open desert at Janos. Carrasco did it. Geronimo, by all indications, never knew who exactly did it. It was just a random Mexican militia. All Mexicans are the same as far as he was concerned, and so he spent the rest of his life killing all the Mexicans he could find.
I've killed many Mexicans. I do not know how many, for frequently I did not count them. Some of them were not worth counting. It's been a long time since then, but still I have no love for the Mexicans. With me, they were always treacherous and malicious. I'm old now, and shall never go on the warpath again. But if I were young and followed the warpath, it would lead into old Mexico.
You know, a disquieting notion, I'm not the first to bring this up. It's such a part of Geronimo's story, this moment where he loses his family, right? But Carrasco took prisoners, slaves, which he sold somewhere else. So I don't know if Alope actually died. She's probably dead now, but I find the notion that she died just laboring somewhere in the shadowy places of history. It's disquieting, I suppose. So Yeehaw Summer isn't about the Apache. It's about the people we are made to be by circumstance. It is about learning to forgive the circumstances that people put you in. It's about learning to forgive people. I realized during my prolonged existential crisis that my problem is not existence. It is existing as a human. Chief Escaminson, in the aftermath of the Camp Grant Massacre, he shot a rancher that he'd been friends with for some time, a white rancher who he'd been friends with.
Asked why he killed his friend years later, Escaminson told an interpreter, "To teach my people that there must be no friendship between them and white men. Anyone can kill an enemy, but it takes a strong man to kill a friend."